Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Retro Dodo Podcast. Today, I am here with Casey from Gortyn Code, a man who has made one of my favourite games that I've been playing recently, slash of all time, Chanty. You've seen me talk about it a lot on Retro Dodo, you've seen the videos I've made of it, read the review, and now I'm getting to chat to the man behind the game itself. Casey, how are you doing?
Thank you so much, Seb, for having me.
I'm very glad you're here, my friend. So much to talk about from this incredible game. I'm just going to kick straight off. And just ask why. When did you come up with the idea for Chanty? For people who don't know about this game, it's a pirate metal rhythm-based game, and you've basically put two amazing things into like a Zelda kind of pirate metal Guitar Hero kind of game and smashed them together to create this amazing title that I never thought I would be able to play on my Analog Pocket, on my Game Boy Color, or my Chromatic. So when did the idea first come around?
Well, the idea has been around quite a long time. Not in the final form, but I would say that I started thinking about it about 8 or 9 years ago. That it would be nice to, have this kind of like a hodgepodge of an adventure game mixed with rhythm elements, where instead of, doing the traditional battle system, you would have to do this kind of like frantic rhythm sections. To be honest, I did not really grasp the final form of the game until I came across the Game Boy development community. It was around the same time when I really got into pirate metal as a subgenre of metal music, which I'm a big fan of. I started listening more and more to the songs. I loved the way, that this is a kind of a style of music that is not meant to be taken too seriously, but at the same time, you can go pretty heavy with it, pretty serious storytelling capacity. Some of my favorite bands have some extremely silly songs and then some really, really epic parts. And in this respect, I think it kind of all clicked together at around 2023 when I decided to partake in the Game Boy competition, a game jam that was organized by a homebrew community of game developers for the Game Boy. So I started to, give shape to this crazy idea. I never really thought that it could work, but after some playtesting, I actually saw that there was potential there. And then after the jam, I decided to continue working on it, and there you have it, the entire Chanty game. It was just, a lot of different things that happened, by happenstance, and then you have a crazy idea coming together on the Game Boy cartridge.
I think for those people who don't know about pirate metal, I listen to a lot of metal music, as it is anyway, but it might seem like a little bit of a jokey idea, but the musicians behind it are incredible, and to kind of capture that feeling of the expertise that goes into writing those songs and slap it into a little Game Boy cartridge is amazing. All in 8-bit chiptune music as well, might I add, that but it still manages to capture that the essence of the genre as well, which is incredible. And the fact that it's not just that you like pirate metal, you've fully gone into the lore of pirate life in this game. You've gone into they go into places like Tortuga. There's the Spanish Inquisition happening. There's the storytelling is phenomenal. So what kind of research did you do to get into creating the story elements of this game? Because as I've said, there's the rhythm element to it, but what we're playing here, what we're looking at, is very much, for me, an adventure title that could sit up there with the early Zelda games, those kind of RPG elements and the beautiful storytelling that made those games like Oracle of Seasons and Ages so captivating to me.
Yeah, I love those games, and you can definitely see the influence they've had on Chanty. in my opinion, I've been a big fan of, pirate mythology altogether. I used, when I was a kid, every time during, Halloween, I'd like to dress up as a pirate. Always, it was my favorite theme on toys, like my Legos, for instance. I always had like all the little pirate sets. So I always loved that. And I've done my personal research for quite some time just to understand and grasp the kind of climate at around the 1700s during the Caribbean. Definitely games like, for instance, Assassin's Creed Black Flag, which also is a huge inspiration behind Chanty, definitely helped, flesh out some of the characters and the interactions among them in a more cinematic way. And then after I decided to really get into developing Chanty in 2023, after the GB Code Game Jam, a lot of research went into, trying to get things just right. It wasn't just a matter of, putting Tortuga in there because Tortuga is like a really famous place of pirate activity, but it was also about understanding what was the state of affairs in Tortuga at the time that the game takes place, where this is reflected also in the game. Tortuga has fallen, let's say, from grace. It's no longer the pirate haven it used to be, because that was in the 1600s. So, the pirate activity had moved to Nassau, which was also the headquarters of the Pirate Republic. So I did a lot of research. I read on a lot of references, and every place, every mission in Chanty, I've tried to capture some small part of that research to make sure that you're playing something that it is also authentic. It's not just fun, but it would also, if by completing the game, you would have more interest to read about this history, this stuff about pirates, then I think that I would have accomplished my goal with all the research that I did. So, for instance, a fun fact, in Portobello, one of the places that you can visit, I actually modeled the entire map based off of historic maps of Portobello with the actual structure of the fort. And in Cartagena, I had to look at historic models of the city of Cartagena, where, how the fortifications were, where was the port located, so that I was able to make something that, even for a Game Boy game, it would resemble the actual area. And then, on the story part, of course, you have this fantasy story element in it, but then things that happen around that story would still reflect the kind of state of affairs between like the English and the Spanish war that was happening at the time. And some stories are also, inspired by true events, like the Haitian Revolution in one of the side stories that is available in the game. So it's just a matter of how much the player is going to notice this stuff. I hope that players will notice, but, the kind of research that went into it, it was one of the hardest parts, but also one of the most rewarding parts to then, after playtesting the game, seeing that everything came together.
I said this about another game released on ModRetro, and I'll come to ModRetro in a little while, but the same feeling with Dragonim as with Chantey. You feel like you're dropped into a world where you're not just coming into a world that's just been born. You arrive in the game, you arrive in Chantey in a world where, as you said, Tortuga's fallen from grace, things are happening. You're at a period of change and uncertainty in the world, and being a pirate isn't, the kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not the all singing, all dancing kind of cool thing it used to be. There's a little bit of tension there, like you're kind of flying under the radar. It's not like piracy is promoted as being this amazing cool thing where you're invincible. You kind of always feel a little bit like you have to hide in the shadows in this game, and I really like that feeling of, again, uncertainty of, are you going to get caught at any point? Should you kind of be there? Things are happening as you're traveling to different areas, and you do feel a little bit like you're the outsider because there is this period where of transition from, I guess, lawlessness into law. So that I am noticing all these things that you've put in there. What I didn't realize is the amount of depth you've gone into with the map creating and recreating those different areas in the game. So how do you go about, I mean, as somebody who doesn't make games, how is the process of taking a let's say a scale drawing of a certain fort or something like that, or the plans of an island, and bringing that into GB Studio and creating this game? How was that process for you to kind of create this little 8-bit version of all the maps and the tomes that you've read about these different areas, and concocting that down to everything that fits in this tiny little cartridge?
Well, the most difficult part was that I had to do a lot of research on actual sources. I read as much as I could, excerpts from museum databases, and I tried to look for historic photographs and old maps, especially maps that are preserved in like museums and that date back to at least the 1700s. To just try and make out how close I could get to how the actual cities were structured. Of course, talking about a pixel art game, you will never get the precise, let's say, shape and size, but at least for some landmark locations, I wanted to make sure that I would capture something that would make each place unique, that you would remember that place for having something that the other places did not have. So when I started, the first thing I did was I used an actual map of the Caribbean, and then carefully on my pixel art creating program tried to start jotting down where each place should be, try to make every little cove and little island. So whenever you are in the overworld playing as the pirate ship, you're actually navigating, as close as I could recreate the actual map of the Caribbean Sea, with all of the islands like Jamaica and the Bahamas, and of course the southern coast of Mexico and Belize.
Mm-hmm.
And then when going into the actual cities, a lot of references, a lot of mood boards were created. I picked up on what was important, what are considered landmarks. Unfortunately, I haven't had the opportunity to travel to these locations myself, so I had to, read up on a lot of travel guides and a lot of people that have visited those locations, what's the most striking feature, architectural styles, and then I tried to apply that into creating each town and each port. So then it was a matter of, how do I create something that stays with you, something that you can easily remember that, okay, this place is Port Royal, this place is Havana. So I started, building around these concepts, which places had forts and actual fortifications. So I tried to build the fortification lines. And then, if there was like a cathedral, which is the case, for instance, in Santiago, then that became the focal point. And I started drafting, the city around it. And then based on that, where do I place the port? Where do I place every location? And then how do I link all of this to make it fun to traverse, to make it fun? Mm-hmm. And then in some places where I have, some mission stealth sections, how do I make these places fun to play, fun to navigate? Where can I hide so that I am not discovered? So it took quite some time, to get things right, and hopefully I believe that, the end result is quite satisfying.
There was one bit quite early on when I was having to follow a man through one of the cities, and it reminded me so much. There's a bit of Oracle of Seasons where I have to follow somebody who's stolen something from me, and this guy kept catching me on Chanty every single time, and I was trying to find a place to hide, and he'd turn around and be like, not again. I did it so many times, but when I got to the end, the feeling of Just the victory of doing it was incredible, and I love little bits in games like that. That you don't kind of get stealth elements like that anymore in games. So it's nice that in 2025 I'm playing a Game Boy Color game with these elements back in again, where I'm just traveling back, you know, 20, 30 years of my life. It's just amazing. As somebody who writes out for a living, I write fantasy books, I write for Retro Dodo. I'd love to talk to you about the mindset you got into for writing the actual story element of this game, because obviously, and we're going to get onto the rhythm part of it because it is a huge part, but you can't have one without the other, and the narrative that runs throughout this game is phenomenal. So you've talked about the research that you've made to get all the elements there. How did you find the story crafting part of it?
Uh, well, the story was it's quite tricky because the very first thing I conceptualized was the ending. So from starting on, I knew where the story needed to go from the beginning, and then understanding, the setting and how I had to arrive at that point. To be honest with you, when I started writing, the story kind of naturally flowed with me. Definitely, I had to go back and revise some parts, but for the first part, which is the demo, the prologue, where you are discovered by this pirate captain, and then this captain gets captured. So you have to assemble a crew and go out and save them. And then this is the prologue part, and then from that point forward, I had to consider, the kind of people that pirates were, the kind of pacts that they made, the kind of opportunistic nature of plundering locations and just joining a crew back then. Again, it went back into researching, the different pirate codes that different pirate captains had. And of course, I wanted to intertwine that with, some fantastical elements, just so that the rhythm sections make sense also from a story kind of perspective. So in the end, I'm really proud. Basically, if you are asking me, I'm more proud of like the story. I think that the story execution went exactly as I had in mind and as I wrote it in my design documentation that I kept throughout the development. I'm really happy with some of the characters because you get to experience these characters as you move forward in the game at your own pace. You can choose to go on adventures to get to know each one of them personally, and these adventures again they refer back to research I did on particular places. Like for instance, there is this one guy that you have to help him find a loved one who is in a convent. And then I had to actually research what kind of rules were established in those convents. Where were those convents? Where were they located? How could somebody reach to these places? Did they actually keep records of people who were there? So that, everything would eventually make sense. And of course, you have to tell a story. You have to be able to keep people engaged. You don't want to give a history lesson. You want to tell a story. So, just adding all of those fantastical elements, of course, things that are inspired by things such as the Evil Dead series, with the book of spells, and also Lovecraft, with kind of like the eldritch horrors that lurk beneath the oceans. So all of this, I believe it came quite organically in the end. And to me, I wanted the ending of the game to make sense, because that was the first part I had completely down from the first moment. I wanted the game to end exactly the way that it ends. So the journey to get there, that was, the important part. And I believe that, taking bits and pieces from the locations and just stringing together this narrative was a challenge, but also one of the most rewarding aspects of the game development.
You also nailed the language completely as well, because you feel like you're actually talking to pirate captains in this thing, or the kind of like scurvy sea dog language that you get. It's not just like, we're listening to the Queen's English here. The way they speak, and each character has its own individual persona as well. And what I also love is the fact that language changes when they realize they're talking to a small child as well, because you play as a younger person in this game. So when you enter, for example, a brothel or something, you'll get people who are like, "Oh, you're too young to be in here, little man," or the guys will suddenly start talking and they'll see that you're a bit smaller and they'll change their tone or the words they use. It's very clever how you've kind of created that balance of seeing the world through kind of like a boy's eyes almost, rather than a fully fledged pirate. Again, the research into how they spoke must have been quite intense as well, because it's not like you can just walk out the door and just say, "Hey, there's a pirate there, let me ask how you speak." So...
Well, if I'm being honest, that part was I was helped in that part very much by actually listening a lot to pirate metal, and especially those bands that really take the pirate theme really seriously. They will provide a lot of templates for using some phrases, for using some words, and of course. You have movies and you have, different references that you can get from like books. Indeed, I used all of that. At some point, I was doing the ye part, instead of you. They will refer to you. I did it so much that I actually started talking like that also in my real life. So at some point I had to kick down. I had to figure out for which characters I would use a more sophisticated kind of language. Like, for instance, the English soldiers will have a different way in which they speak. And then I would try and translate to the best of my ability, some things in Spanish, so that Spanish people would also sound quite authentic, especially since one of your companions is a Spaniard. Then I have an Italian person there. There's also, some people of African descent in the game. And in the end, it all just, makes quite a diverse range of characters, I think, with whom you interact. And I believe that each one of them at least speaks in a way that makes sense in terms of the context. So you don't feel like talking to one person is exactly the same as talking to another person. So everybody has their own like speech patterns, and it kind of makes sense. It transports you to another world. And if you are playing the game and you are, reading these lines in your mind with like a piratey voice, it's, again, then it's a job well done on my part.
Yeah, you get into it, you really get into it, and you start to, again, I say this quite a lot when I watch Pan's Labyrinth. I can't speak Spanish, but after a while of reading the subtitles, I start to feel like, oh yeah, this is making more sense to me, even though I can't speak Spanish. You kind of just sort of, you listen to the speech patterns, you know what's coming up. Again, when I'm reading this, I'm playing as a pirate, and I am too thinking, I mean, a lot of the time it's because I've got "What Should We Do with the Drunken Sailor" stuck in my head as well, and then I am walking around saying "ye" as well. You do really get into the character, and you get into the mindset of these people, which helps when you then get into these pirate-based rhythm battles, which is the fact that, we can have the mod retro and we can use, A, B, left and right on the D-pad to pull out rhythms and battle other people is wild. Like, how hard was it to start with? How hard was it to come up with that concept? And also, that must have been something so different going into the GB Studio competition with this idea. You must have been quite confident going in thinking nobody else is going to have thought of something like this.
The idea altogether of combining the adventure with the rhythm, as I said, it's something that I had for quite some time, but I didn't have the right tools. I didn't have the right, idea, the right spark, if you want to put everything together. And then, when I became a fan of pirate metal, then I knew that this is the kind of music I want to use. And then when I found out that there's this whole community of developers who are making games for the Game Boy. I love my Game Boy. I still have my original Game Boy, like my very first Game Boy Pocket. This is, it hasn't been, it still works. I haven't modded it or anything. I just want to keep the experience authentic. So just being able to create something for this was my main motivation. Now, going into the actual competition with that, like you said, the most difficult part for me was that whereas there is a template for rhythm games, of course, you have the Guitar Hero series, Rock Band, and all of the rhythm games that have become quite popular since. There wasn't really a template for doing that on the DMG because I wanted my game, because I have this Game Boy Pocket, this was my first Game Boy. I also had a DMG Game Boy that was my sister's. That was my actual first, console that I actually played. I wanted something that I could use on an actual Game Boy Pocket. So I decided very early on not to use the Game Boy Color advanced capabilities, just make something that would work on the DMG. And then I quickly found out that there was no template for any rhythm games on the DMG, at least on the official library. I don't want to omit potentially somebody that might have done something like that, earlier.
Sure, yeah.
On the homebrew community. I knew that there were some Japanese titles on the Game Boy Color, but the kind of visuals that I had in mind for the battles, it didn't really help looking at those screens and trying to figure out how I wanted the game to look. And then I went into one of my favorite visual experiences on a Game Boy. It's on a Game Boy Advance. It's this game called Yggdra Union. I don't know if you know it. It's a strategy game, mostly a tactics game, where you have these two competing sides, and whenever you are having a battle, then you can see the troops from the one side and the troops from the other, with like the commanding officer portraits. I really wanted to emulate that. And then I thought, if I put like the guitar neck in the middle, because you have to, usually the middle part is where you have kind of like statistics and whatever, but in my case I don't want to use that. So let's put the guitar neck in the middle and just, try and see what is the most natural way to use the Game Boy interface to build out these rhythm sections. And very quickly, the left and right, you can press them both at the same time. So it made sense to use left and right and A and B just so that you have 4 notes. I figured that because of the limitations of the platform, I had to use notes only on the very important part. So there is no actual guitar line or like a drum line that you have to follow. It's mostly like you would hum with a song. So if you listen to the song, you are actually at some time, you will play the part that is the part, let's say, of the vocals, and then you will play the drum part, and then you will play the guitar part. And basically you just go with the entire line of the song. And then I started working on the actual songs, and Drunken Sailor is one of my personal favorite sea shanties. I remember playing Assassin's Creed, and I always had the crew sing the Drunken Sailor sea shanty whenever I found it. And I did my own rendition on it. I arranged it and then put it to work with this gameplay aspect. And that's when everything clicked together. And that's when I knew that even for the competition, I had something unique. But then that is when I decided that I wanted to explore this idea even further.
The battles themselves are tricky. There are times when I've tried to get to that sweet spot of being able to get through to the next round, and I've just not made it there quickly enough because it's not something that lasts for a few seconds and then you've won. You really have to put the concentration into it. So how did you go about creating all of these tracks yourself, arranging them all in 8-bit, and what was your idea for the difficulty curve from kind of beginning through to the final boss battle, as it were?
So the idea here was, like I mentioned, I wanted to make something that pays homage to pirate metal. Some of the and heavy metal in particular, many songs they go on for like 5-6 minutes long. I wanted to have that in the game. I didn't know when I started out if I could fit everything into a cartridge, but then I found out that there were people that were actually making actual music on a cartridge. That's like a musical cartridge. There's no game in it. And then I thought, why don't I make Chanty do both? So it can be both a game that you can play, and it's also like a music cartridge, because compiling all the songs together, it's about 48 minutes of actual music, and that's just the songs that you play in the battles. I believe that the actual length of the battles can help, because of the limitations of the Game Boy. I cannot have like an entire barrage of notes drop at the same time. I have to keep the synchronization as much as possible, and adding more notes, making parts more difficult would make it almost impossible for somebody just on a Game Boy screen to try and play a song for like 6 minutes. And at the end of the day, I want to tell the story. I believe that the story is the most rewarding part of the game, reaching that the final story. So I didn't want you missing a few notes be like the end of it, and then you have to start over. And that quickly became apparent to me last year when I was at Gamescom. I had a lot of players who were really interested in the game and how it looked, and when they got into the rhythm part, they immediately dropped the Game Boy, and they were like, I suck at rhythm games. I don't want to play that. Oh, unfortunately, this is how you do the battles. And I quickly realized that I wanted to make it accessible for even those people that consider themselves not a fan of rhythm games, or that they don't feel like they are going to perform well. So this is where I came up with the idea of like this hype meter, where the entire point of the song is to hype up your troops. So it's not just about, playing the song, but it ties back into the narrative in a way that, whenever you see a movie or you play a game, the actual music that you hear, it gets you pumped. So the idea here is that play the music well enough so that your troops are, they can prevail over the troops of the enemy. So this is where I put the high bar, and I made sure to create 2 difficulty levels, one which is a bit more accessible, and the other one which is a bit more challenging, even though I've played it to death myself, so I can clear both quite easily right now. But even I struggled in the beginning to get a lot of notes in the end. So it's just a part of constant practicing, and then the length of the song, I believe, actually helps, because there are a lot of parts of the song that repeat during the song itself. So you got like a chorus, for instance, that will repeat at some point. So you have already practiced it once earlier in the song, and then you got some places where the music will go down a bit. It will be a bit slower, so you get some time to rack up some of that hype meter, especially if you have it, let it drop, and then you get to play an additional part. Or some songs, they will have some repeating parts right after another. So you get down the pattern really quickly, and then you are able to very quickly build that high bar up until the end. I did not want for players to get discouraged by not making it like all the way to the end, like not filling out the high bar. I do give a little bonus, monetary bonus, if you actually manage to fill out your high bar, and then after you complete the game, you basically unlock the entire set list that you can either listen to, or you can just play the game, replay those battle parts, and try to improve upon your score. So essentially, after beating the game, it becomes a choice of whether you want to play the story again, or if you want to play only the rhythm parts, or if you want only to listen to the songs. If you really like the songs that much, you can only listen to that. There's no losing condition for not making the notes, let's say, in that part. So you can actually use the cartridge as like a musical cartridge, which was my dual game plus music idea that I had in the beginning.
One of the things I really like about Chanty as well is the option of doing up the abandoned island and the little house that you have there. It's kind of got that little Animal Crossing-esque kind of feel to it for me. Is that something that you kind of implemented into the game kind of halfway through? Is that something you always wanted to do? Or was it just kind of like a happenstance thing you came across and thought this would be a nice idea?
It was one of the original ideas to have like this destroyed mansion and having you repair it. I haven't played Animal Crossing games, so guilty of that. So I don't know if it resembles that or not. I would say that mostly, again, this is an idea maybe that I borrowed from like Assassin's Creed, where in a similar setting, at some point you get to one island and then that island becomes like your pirate base and you can spend some money to, create and upgrade your ship or your mansion. And the idea kind of, sprang from that, and it was originally my idea to do it. Fun fact, maybe a spoiler or not, but the mansion in Chanty is in a completely different island, and I have a little Easter egg about the connection with Black Flag. If you visit the original island where in Black Flag there was, the actual mansion where the main character was there, you can actually visit that island in Chanty as well. Not saying anything else, just not to ruin the spoiling.
We like exclusives. We like exclusives here. Though. That's a nice little Easter egg to get out to the fans.
Yeah. So in the beginning, I decided I wanted to make that, but the difficult part was to actually tie that to the story. Again, I did not just want to have it for the sake of having it, for the sake of the player just going back and spending some of the money on that mansion. I wanted to make it work also within the story itself. So I started again my research, reading about different bases and different pirate havens, and I came across Isla de Providencia, which is where the pirate mansion is there, and this was one of the bases that was used by Henry Morgan. One of the most successful pirates in history. And then basically from that part, the entire storyline that traces back to Henry Morgan at some point in the story, this is where actually that came to be. This was not originally in the story, but after implementing that part, it actually did factor into the story. So you learn some things about Henry Morgan at that part. And then, I dug my own grave, and I then had to, do research into Henry Morgan himself. But again, it's all part of this rewarding experience of developing and delivering a game where I believe that if you are like a history nut like myself, you will appreciate all of these little details being in the game.
You don't just have like pirates here because, or, soldiers here because this, there's a reason for everything. Every kind of, if you go back, almost kind of Lord of the Rings-esque, if you go back and like look at the the lineage of people, or like the reason for people being there, like the lore behind this game is really solidified, and I really enjoy that as a prolific reader and someone who loves playing all kinds of games. I love the fact that the fantasy element of it is is solid. And there are no, for me anyway, I don't know about you. I mean, when you make something, you always find parts that you'd like to change again. But for me, as a gamer, I feel like all the kind of like little plot, all the holes have been filled. It's very tight, and the storyline is got a great narrative to it. So I mean, I've thoroughly enjoyed every second of it, and obviously, ModRetro have incredibly enjoyed it as well, because this has gone from a GB Studio creation that you've made for a competition to now being sold on cartridges with full color manuals, box art, and t-shirts by the look of it, with the one you're wearing, and being shipped all across the world. So how did that come about, and how was that for you, seeing your creation packaged up and sent off by such a huge company?
To me, it came as a surprise, to be honest. already back in 2023, about Christmas time, I first spoke with Chris from Spacebot, who is also the publishing manager, the head of the publishing arm of ModRetro, who spoke to me about, an exciting new opportunity. Of course, when I started developing Chanty, it was only through emulation. I then started to figure out what kind of tools can you actually use to put this game on a cartridge. I didn't really think that I would actually convince somebody with like this crazy idea of like a cartridge that doubles as like a music album of sorts, and the rhythm elements with pirates and an adventure in it. So I did prepare a pitch after I spoke with Chris about that, which he was kind enough to present to the higher ups at ModRetro. And then when this was greenlit, I remember that when I first spoke to Chris and it was greenlit, and then I learned a bit more about the project that was ModRetro at the time. I was so excited. It was Greek time. It was like 2:00 at night. I woke my wife up and I told her everything about it, and like the game is going to be on a cartridge, and it's going to be on this new device that is going to be created. It's going to be sold together, and it was to me, when I think about myself as a child, when I was playing on a Game Boy, like I mentioned, it was my sister's Game Boy. It was not mine. So she always had first dibs, we always wanted to play it, but at the end of the day, it was hers. So when I did not have access to it, I remember distinctly that I had this little wood cutting set, and I would go and paint cartridges of my own. I would then cut them out with like this little saw, create like a little Game Boy from wood, and I wish I still had it, but
I wish you had
I
this as
don't.
well. That would be incredible.
Yeah. I wish I still had it. I think I threw it away at some point, as you do. But potentially, remembering back then, this is the very first time that I even, considered the fact of making games. So being that currently I have my own game that can actually play on the Game Boy that I grew up with, is completely crazy to me. And ModRetro has been a great partner to work with in terms of the support they have provided throughout the development. And you see the results right now as other games and other amazing stuff that they are doing. Like the card clinic and the upgradable firmware updates, and the device itself is just beautiful.
It's just great for me, and I'm really thankful to people like you and Spacebot and all the other games that are coming out at the minute, that we have a thriving Game Boy Color scene again, and a DMG scene with games like Baby T-Rex. Heading back in 2025, I thought the days of me getting cardboard box games and taking off that shrink wrap were over completely. But now at 35, I'm opening up new games and new adventures for the first time again, like I used to do back when I bought Pokemon Trading Card Game for the Game Boy Color. That for me, the nostalgia is incredible. What have you got coming up next with Gortyn Code? What's next on the horizon? This is the part of the podcast where I try and just get everything out of you that you probably don't want to tell me. If you've listened to the Spacebot episode, you know how reluctant Chris and Bumbus were to give me anything. I asked them if they were going to do a Dragon Inn for the ModRetro Game Boy Advance clone, to try and get them to tell me if there was going to be one of those, and they wouldn't give me anything. But what are you? Have you got another game in the pipeline? Have you got a sequel to Chanty, perhaps? Have you got the ideas, maybe?
Lots of ideas. So Gortyn Code, I created Gortyn Code as part of the entire development project with Chanty, when I realized that there is something there that could potentially, break out and become something bigger than what I originally had intended. I'm really happy to see the reception so far has been really great, both from players and publications. And I'd definitely like to revisit the world of Chanty at some point. I need to take a break from heavy metal pirates right now, so we definitely do have some other stuff in the pipeline. I'm gonna follow the same strategy as Chris and Bumbis, and I
thought
won't.
I had you then. I thought I had you.
But yes, there are some other buns in the oven, if you will. They're two completely different kind of projects, so I'll just give you that. Really excited to see, because yet again these are projects where a lot of research has to go into them just to increase authenticity. When we are in a position to say more about these projects, you will be, the first to know. We will make sure of that.
That's good enough for me. That's good enough for me.
And yeah, hopefully, at some point I'd like to revisit Chanty, because a lot of work went into it, and I believe that the story and the lore especially, is quite open to be extended into more games, more media. So we will see what happens. So far, no concrete plans, but definitely, willingness to revisit the space.
What about the thought of making games for different systems? Or are you solely sticking with the Game Boy because of the nostalgic element it has for you?
Definitely, trying to run a game company, you have to keep your options open. You don't necessarily want to lock yourself into a particular format. For now, definitely the Game Boy is a piece of hardware that I personally love. I have huge nostalgia for it, and I'd like to keep supporting it for as long as I can. Then, for some of the future ideas, definitely we could expand both in the retro scene as well as into like more modern systems. We will see how that goes. But for now, I can at least confirm that we are still, committed to our mission to create more retro experiences and revive nostalgia in a similar way that we did with Chanty. Try to bring in these new ideas into this retro space and just try and see how crazy it can go and how much we can fit into 4 megabytes of cartridge.
So I might be seeing Chanty 64 at some point, is what I'm saying. Perhaps, who knows?
You never know. You never know. At some point, we will see.
I'll keep everything crossed. For anybody who has listened to this and is very intrigued, I urge you to check out the review that I did on Chanty here at Retro Dodo. You can head over to ModRetro's website to grab yourself a copy of this game. Where can people follow UKC and keep up to date with what you're getting on with and what's coming next for you?
So the best way that you can keep up with the most up-to-date news would be through my social media. There's different options for people that are following different channels. There's in Twitter/X channel, there's a Blue Sky channel, and we recently also created an Instagram for all of our updates, including Chanty, but also future projects. You can also visit our website at www.gortyncode.gr, where we will also occasionally publish, big news and big release announcement. And of course, you can keep tabs on everything ModRetro related, because especially on the Chanty part, we have some stuff lining up, like an update to the game coming soon through the Card Clinic. So you can keep updated also on Chanty, particularly through the ModRetro channels.
Amazing. Well, Casey, thank you very much for joining us and talking all things Chanty. I am going to now go and carry on playing after this podcast while I have my lunch. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and we'll
Thank
speak
you so
to you very
much
soon.
for having me.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much.